What's going on, hockey friends? We are back and it's draft season, baby. It's the best time of the year, and this year is the year of the defenseman. And I know I see the irony in me saying that it's the year of the defenseman when you can easily make a mock draft of the top 3, even top 5, and have it only be forwards with Macklin Celebrini and Ivan Demidov, who I think should be the first 2 names off the board. And then you have Kaden Lindstrom, TJ Ginla, Berkeley Cat, and Cole Eiserman. Yada yada yada, you get the idea. But I really like the diversity of defensemen this year, and I will get into them obviously, but you have the giant Silayev, and then you have the more modern guys like Zeev Buium and Zayne Parekh. So here are the guys I'll be going over, and there will be timestamps in the description if you just want to skip to a player of your choice. I will just be giving my opinions on them and what I like about them. Starting off with Artyom Levshunov, who I think will be the first defenseman to go in the draft, and there's a lot to love here. Starting off with a massive factor, he's a right D. Now, this is something a lot of teams will value, and it's a major factor why I think he's probably going third to Anaheim. I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago takes him at second, but if you look at the teams that are 4th and 5th, you have Columbus and they have David Jiricek, and Montreal has David Reinbacher. They are right D-men, so they already have that covered. Anaheim, they have Owen Zellweger and Pavel Mintyukov, and they're great, but they're lefties. Tristan Luneau is a righty, which is good, but I hold Levshunov in higher regard. Also, you have to factor in that they traded Jamie Drysdale during the season, so they filled that hole as well, and if this happens, be on the lookout for a video on Anaheim over the summer. But as a player, like I said, there's a lot to love here. He's a really good two-way, but with more emphasis on the offensive defenseman part, and he has really good size as well. And as we'll see, we're kind of heading towards this world where the young upper echelon of offensive defensemen tend to be smaller, but Levshunov is big. He's a physical force. 6'2", 208 is nothing to scoff at. Now, he's one of the older prospects in this draft. He's an October birthday, so he'll be turning 19 when the 24-25 season starts. You compare that to, I know he's a forward, but Macklin Celebrini, he's still 17. He's turning 18 next week, I think. But overall, that's not something I care too much about, to be honest. If anything, you get a more ready player. So the offensive part of his game, he loves to activate to join the attack as a forward, and he does it with success most of the time because he's got a good shot and passing ability and range. But obviously this is something that will have to be balanced when he joins the NHL, because doing it in the NCAA is one thing and he's been doing it great, but doing it in the NHL is another. But the fact that he's so good at joining the rush and being that extra forward and knowing when to do it is a good sign of his smarts and IQ. Now, his shot and passing ability isn't on the level where it sticks out and makes you go wow. In fact, there's not really this one wow factor about him, because his defensive game isn't that amazing. He's taken strides over the season, and he's definitely competent when it comes to that part, but the closest thing to this one wow factor would be his skating. He's very mobile, he's good in the transitions, and I guess the main point I want to make with Levshunov here is that there's so much to build on. He's already good to very good in all aspects of his game. The physical frame is there, and I think the ceiling is sky high, and to me, he projects as a top defenseman in these coming years. Also, he seems like a really chill and fun guy from the combine interviews.
Led to some more unsportsmanlike calls.
Levshunov! Floating into the zone.
Now from the Belarusian Levshunov, we move swiftly to the Russian Anton Silayev, and if Levshunov was missing this one wow factor, Silayev has it, and it's his size at 6'7", coupled with his skating. Now, he was garnering a lot of attention early on in the year because his production in the KHL was off the charts. He scored 6 out of his 11 total points in his first 6 games of the season, and after that he showed proof of what's most likely his offensive upside. Because he's not an offensive defenseman. He's a defensively sound guy whose biggest selling point is the fact that he's a giant and a great skater. He's a massive wildcard in my book, not only because who he is as a player, but also we still have the Russian factor. I mean, there are a lot of defensemen in this draft, evidently, and most of them are a lot more tangible and well documented than him, and they most likely have a more varied toolbox than Silayev as well. Now, What you're betting on with Silayev is that he's going to be a great shutdown guy, a top 4 kind of defenseman that you lean on in tough moments, and that idea makes me think he's an option for almost every team in the top 10, because most of these teams already have that modern defenseman prospect that we talked about, someone who's more of an offensive defenseman, and if you can get Silayev and get him to that high potential, the amount of freedom that would create for these other defensemen would be crazy and a great selling point. Also, just having him a 6'7" body with great skating ability, and hopefully seeing a mean streak in him in the playoffs is just crazy. Personally, I wouldn't put him in the top 5, I would probably put him at 8 or 9, and I think he's going to be a great defenseman in the purest sense of the word. Sam Dickinson is up next, and this is more of a proper two-way defenseman that I think any team could use at any point in a game, and honestly I think he might be the one that resonates the most with me. He's a big guy, smooth skater with a great shot, and there's just this basic and simple fascination with these kind of defensemen for me. Just a no-nonsense kind of guy that just looks really at home and mature on the ice. This is for me a near top pairing defenseman for the future. He's solid defensively as well, and he has that offensive upside. It's not on the same level as, say, Zayne Parekh or Yakemchuk, but what they bring in their offensive game isn't as backed up by their defensive game relative to Sam Dickinson's offense to defense ratio, if that makes sense. He's a very safe pick. This is the important thing about him. He's a very safe pick. You know what you're gonna get, the foundation is there, and it's a very solid one. So those were the more two-way or pure defensemen. And now it's time for the trio of offensive defensemen, and they are Zeev Buium, Zayne Parekh, and Yakemchuk. Starting up with Zeev Buium, and I know I said offensive defenseman, but he's more of a two-way kind of guy, but there's definitely a lot more offensive upside with him, and he's had an incredible season in the NCAA. He ended up winning it all with Denver, and in that final of the Frozen Four, he had an assist which I just think sums up his game really well. He carries it in after a nifty move, another nifty move, manipulating his man, and a sweet pass, and it's just so smooth. And it's that offensive upside that is so tantalizing with Buium. He's great on his edges, he's very agile, he can make these moves on the point look so easy, and I mean sometimes it's a bit predictable, but the fact that he has it in his toolbox is obviously very good, and it's this lateral movement and mobility that I think is something a lot of teams will look at as one of his biggest strengths. It should be said that he's not the fastest skater in a straight line, and that his defensive game, or rather his physical play, isn't that impressive. And I mean, he's not the biggest guy either at 6 foot, but that's probably the one weakness in his game. For me, this is a top 4 pairing kind of guy with that offensive upside, which is going to give you a lot of power play time where he's going to score points. And he's someone that can drive play, but I don't see him turning into this big minute-munching defenseman you can use in every situation, like you maybe would with Dickinson or Levshunov. But Buium has the better offensive upside and is more entertaining to watch. So I think with Buium is that it's more about finding a fit for a team that can specialize their use of him, and that's why I can see all teams in the 7 to 11 region eyeing him up.
Buium drives the net. In front, easy setup for...
Well then, here we go with Zayne Parekh. If you just look at his stats, you must be scratching your head and wondering why he's not going first overall. As a defenseman with 33 goals, you must be doing something right. Right? And obviously, this is this is the best pure offensive defenseman in the draft. And just to put his numbers into context, this is the second highest points total in the OHL this millennium, just behind Ryan Ellis, and that was in his draft plus 2 year. So he has better production than guys like Evan Bouchard, Drew Doughty, Dougie Hamilton, and to relate it to this year's draft, Sam Dickinson. So he's an offensive monster. Let's just get this physicality and defensive game out of the question, because it's not his strengths at all. There you go, big surprise, the smallest offensive defenseman isn't an overly good defender, whoop-de-doo. What he can do though is put up points in the OHL, and it's probably going to translate into the NHL too, because his offensive toolbox is so good. Starting off with his shot, it's the best of all defensemen in this draft, and he has this ability of getting it through one net, every single time through the screen, and that in itself is such a good quality, and his release is so good. And obviously the stats speak for themselves, because 33 goals as a defenseman is very good, and then his playmaking is so good. You have blind passes, shot passes, everything is just so good. If you're looking for a pure offensive defenseman, you have the best one right here. And if he hits the heights he can reach, he's gonna be incredible. The ceiling on him is so high. And I'll say this to finish on Parekh. In 2017, I had a very sneaky feeling about Cale Makar, and he ended up being number 1 on my board in that draft. This year, Celebrini is the best and should go first overall. I'm not saying that Parekh is the next Makar, but I would not be surprised if Parekh goes second, or in a few years' time we'll look back at this draft and Parekh is the new number 1 pick from this draft. But we'll see. And finally we have Carter Yakemchuk, the weirdest and funniest, most vibes kind of defenseman. He's pretty much a forward with the way he activates on the rush and joins the attack. I saw someone describe him as an ESHL player's idea of an offensive defenseman, and yeah, I would agree with that. It's entertaining. I'll give him that. He's a big guy, he's physical, and he's violent. He has a great shot, he's a great shooter obviously with those stats, and he's very skilled on the puck. My worry is that he's just taking advantage of his big size, and once he gets to the NHL, he's gonna be found out. That kind of play he likes to make will be found out, and the skating isn't up to scratch at the moment. There's such boom or bust potential with this guy. He can become really good, and that's why I can see a team like San Jose taking a chance with him with their second pick at 14th overall, because you have the surefire star, like he's gonna be a great player in Celebrini. And if Yakemchuk can come good, and if he does, it's gonna be really good, and it'll be the perfect icing on the cake. And you know, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if like they kind of move him to forward at one point. It would be interesting to see. So that closed out our 6 defensemen. I just want to get a word in on Aron Kiviharju, because long-term 2024 draft enthusiasts, which that sounds wrong, might be wondering what happened to him. You know, 2 years ago, he looked like a lock for number 1 in this draft, just an amazingly smooth and skilled defenseman coming out of Finland. But now, 2 years later, we're at the draft and he might not even make the top 20. He might not even go in the first round. I've seen people have him as low as 60, which is crazy. The sad truth about him is that injuries have plagued him and kept him out of a big chunk of this draft year. And there are also concerns about his defensive game and size. He's a small guy, but he's very skilled with a good first pass and really good carrying the puck with those body feints. And it's such a shame, because I was super excited about him. I watched him at the Linka Gretzky, I think it was 2 years ago, and I thought he was going to be that guy that goes first overall 2 years ago. It's a shame for Finns as well, because I know you guys want to see a guy go first overall, but I guess you will just have to wait. Well guys, that's it. The draft's not far away now. We know Celebrini will go first overall, but then it's up in the air. If I had to make a ranking myself of who I would prefer my team picked out of these defensemen, it depends on what day you're asking me. Levshunov and Parekh are my go-tos for now. I think Levshunov has always been my number 1 guy, but right now it's Parekh second. Yakemchuk is last, and then it just depends on what I'm feeling that day. And that's gonna be it for today. If you made it till the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I have some news here. A few months ago I created a Substack where sometimes I'll just dump my thoughts and stuff. If you're interested in reading those, I'll provide a link in the description where you can subscribe to it. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next one. The next one's really exciting, so I will see you in that one. Bye for now.